putting the felt, so you put it back.
Yeah. Come video this. On the bichords, you need to skip a string. Notice every other. With the trichords, you insert it between each note, but on the bichords, you put it every other note.
Oh, okay.
And there's just a little pattern when tuning that you got to follow.
And all the way down like that?
All the way down.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you might want a couple wedge mutes to wedge off so that you have the inside string there and the inside string on that one. You can put wedge mutes here as well. I'll just carry those down with me. But now every note in the piano has only one string open, so that I can tune all single strings the whole time and do my comparisons real easy. There's half the community does this, and the other half the community does notes as they go and tunes unisons as they go, and they pull mutes along with them, wedge mutes along with them. So I did this mostly because it was just easy to learn this way, and I was able to isolate one aspect at a time, kind of, and it prepared me for the exam, because when you take the RPT exam, they strip mute the piano. You're going to listen with me, and we're going to listen to the fourths, fifths, thirds, and sixths. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to show you the checks as we go, and we're going to decide how good this temperament octave is before I even tune it, how well it held up. And so... we may adjust this pitch level in a little bit. I'm going to float the pitch where it is right now for the sake of time and stability. It's 11.83 cents sharp of concert pitch. So A is at 443 right now. So actually had a cellist who's from Istanbul, but he's teaching at Lee University. And he said when before he came to America, in Istanbul and in Europe, they were 443, 445 with their orchestras.
So my piano would be all right over there.
Yeah. And when he came to America, of course, they were 440, and he feels that Europe has brought theirs down to 442-ish to try to get closer to America. But yeah, this was pretty common for him growing up in Istanbul. It was 443 in the piano. Okay. Yeah. Which, of course, he's a cellist. String players like it up that high for some reason. All right, we're gonna check the octave. So here's a basic temperament sequence. There's a number of them to get all these notes. With equal temperament, we want all of these minor seconds equal. To get there, we want to set our octave. So we're gonna do a 4/2 octave. We're gonna use this F down here to check this major third and this major 10th. And we want to listen to whether or not those are beating the same. We're listening to this note right there. Can you hear that? Are they the same?
Exactly, are they? No.
No, this one is slower than this one. Here, I'm going to show you. Go to A3 now. See, it's flat. So let me put this back up here. I can slightly hear it in the octave. Tuning this, I'm trying to tune a 4/2, so I'm listening to this note that's in these two notes, and actually I can do this. You hear it? Let me put it back out of tune. It's not ghosting well because it's completely out of tune. Do you hear it moving?
Oh, for sure.
Hear it in tune
now? It's like a straight line instead of...
Now it's going... Yeah, it was going... But...
I describe it as being focused in zero focused in.
I don't normally ghost, but it does help you zero in on the partial. So notice we're listening to the A6 here. I mean A5. That is in the A3 and A4 note as a coincident partial. But we're listening to it. When we play this, we're listening here in the note. Sometimes it can be hard to hear if it's in tune, if I put it out of tune, but I want to check our A3. We're very close. I want to see how close we are. We're just slightly sharp, actually. We'll put A4 back. Basically a pure 4/2. I like to tune a wide 4/2. So does this tuner. So most pianos will have a pure 4/2 or even a slightly wide 4/2. What I hear is this subtle little tonal rise and openness that happens when it's a slightly wide 4/2. Slightly slower to see how we are. Much closer. See, and we're within 1 cent now. Test here. So I'm gonna put it, and this is a bald one L, just like Hal's. So your piano might like it a little bit wider than what this tuner wants to put it at. Beat in this string too, which makes it difficult. But here go, as opposed to that one's a little bit better. There's a little change, but it's not. Hear all that? Hear how straight those are? That's a good one. Got some movement. It's a good one. That was not too bad, but it's going. That was good. Makes it more difficult to tune by ear. That might be why I'm trying to put it I don't know, dinner thoughts. Let me turn this on silent because it's interrupting us. Anyway, you got to set your octave. Fifths should be cleaner than fourths. Those are about the same. Well, these notes are probably not right, but there's movement in that fourth. Clean fifth. But the way to check it is also a check note. So fourths, when you're tuning a fourth, your major third below the bottom note is your check note. So you're going to do. And what you want is 4 beats per second, 5 beats per second. Well, not even a second. You want a 4-5 ratio. So count 4 here, and then count 5 in the same amount. Get your tempo there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that should be 5. It's slightly faster. It's very close that it's hard to tell. Now, if you want to check fifths. Let's check this fourth right here, E to A. It sounds out of tune to me, so we're going to check it by going to major third below. Big change. Do you hear the change? And we're listening to that note right there. We're listening to E6. Can you hear it? So if we're listening to that pitch. Right now it's going, it's harder to hear them up in this region. Some people like to tune their octave down here because that's a slower beating interval. Can you hear them beating? Listening here. So they can't count them. That's about 14 beats per second. It's actually not that too bad. Anyway. This E feels a little flat, a little low to me. Curious before we move it. Yeah. So you're going a little low. By about 1 cent. I think that there should be no movement in it. It should sound nice and clean. There is a little movement, but I think that movement's coming because the A and the E have movement on their own. Slow movement. Let's listen to the D. That one's clean. That one's clean. These two notes have movement by themselves. So, but this is the Harvey chord. Sounds pretty good. I think it would sound cleaner than that if the A and the E themselves were not having movement on their own. But that's the Harvey chord. So if you have a nice musical tone there with no movement, then you've got an adequate stretch and temperament starting right here.
Okay.
You can use that check. There's lots of different checks you can use, and I'll throw out some as I remember them. I don't use this a lot, but sometimes I will check it just to see. And then, but you use that check and that check. So when you do this check, so the check for a fourth is the major third below the bottom note, there, and a major sixth from that check note below the top note. And what you want is 4 to 5. The third should be 4. The sixth should be 5. Beat rate comparisons. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was your tempo. Then you want the sixth to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. From Chicago to LA, from Chicago to LA, from Chicago to LA, from Chicago to LA, from Chicago. There's lots of, what do they call those, mnemonics? That's the check for the 4th. The check for the 5th, okay, is a 6th below the bottom note. An octave and a 3rd, major 10th. So a major 6, major 10. This time, again, the 3rd should be slower. The major 10 is basically a wide. It's an octave and a 3rd. It's a major 10. So you're dealing with a 3rd, just displaced an octave, and a 6th again. So the 3rds should be 4 to 5 relationship. 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now that's just a rule of thumb. Depending on the other relationships, you might slightly tweak that. But to begin with, you're shooting for a 4 to 5 relationship here. You can check any, and this note, by the way, these check notes don't have to be in tune. They just have to be in a place where you can hear a perceivable beat that you can trace and follow. Because like up here, just too fast to count. We're not trying to count. And if you need to displace it, you just do an octave lower. So that's the checks for the 4th and 5th. This is the check for a 4-2 octave. You got your octave here. Major 3rd below the bottom of the note will give you major 3rd, major 10th. Okay, and the relationship there is pure or slightly wide, like a half a beat per second difference between this and this. So pure, and then maybe just breathe on it to make it wide, to open it up. And when you tune these 2 notes right here, and you do your 4th to 5th, or your 5th to 4th, you'll feel where this A3 needs to be compared to where you want your 4th and 5th to be. You want your 5ths very clean, your 4ths to have a little roll. So this 5th needs to be clean, 4th needs to have a roll, this 5th needs to be clean, that 5th needs to have a roll. All right, you work with those and do this check right here, and that'll put your A3 in the right spot. And when you have this, now you've got the right distance here to then work all these notes out, and these 2 are already tuned. That's the beginning of me laying the bearings, the temperament octave that I like to lay.
Okay.
So from there we can do 4ths. We can go from D to G, tune that with our check. Ooh, that's wide. Here it feels more than acceleration. It's like take off at the starting line. Sometimes I visualize a conductor swinging their arm to see the difference. I'm counting 4s compared to 4s for a moment to see the acceleration difference. Do you feel the difference? So that G is very fast, which means it's very sharp. So let's see where we are. Maybe it's actually flat. What happened to our D here? Our D has moved a little bit. So it wasn't the G that was the problem, it was the D. Now keep in mind, this is a Baldwin L. This temperament's probably going to be a little wider than where the phone wants it, but now that we're scrutinizing tuning by ear. We'll start down here with A. Remember, we're listening here. Bit of a jump there. Back down, and back up. fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. So the temperament is slightly awkward. So that's basically how you would start off tuning your temperament by ear, and you could go around, circle of fourths and fifths, tuning here, then tuning there, then tuning there, then tuning there, and then flip flop. Then you've done your whole thing. That's traditionally how to tune around, and if you do your checks along the way, you'll come out pretty good. Of course, with practice. There's other ways to set temperaments. I like to split it in half so that my error is halfway through the temperament instead of. So what I'll do is I'll tune off this fifth, this fourth, the D. So I got a D and an E to start with. So I'll go this way to about there, where I have to flip flop, and then I'll come back to the E and wind up right there. So my error should be found halfway through the temperament instead of all the way through the temperament, and it'll usually wind up right in here. And then I'll just try to tweak things by using some checks, like thirds comparisons or sixths. Listen to that jump. Never mind, it was not as big as I thought. It is a little jump. Slow. Faster. Those are about the same. That's a bit faster. So those are not evenly accelerating. Now, if you were to notice how it's still musical, even though it's not perfect. So there is this tolerance range when tuning pianos, especially if you're on something like a spinet or a junkier piano. Spinets cannot be tuned very well. It's because of the short string length and all over this break area. It's just obnoxiously difficult. So the tuner will help to progressively work across that. Your ear can as well. But sometimes you're going to leave things. You got to decide: do I want my octaves cleaner than my thirds? Or do I want my fifths cleaner than my thirds? Or do I want my third progression cleaner than my fifths? You'll develop a taste over time. Typically, I'm going to listen to the octave, fifth, fourth, and I'm going to check the octave. Might also check for the 6-3. This is the 4-2 octave. So I'm tuning this note. Is that the note I'm on? No, I already tuned it. The 4-2 is quite a bit wide. That's also wide. The 6-3 is there's a movement in it. you see what I'm doing, 10 octaves. There's a lot of checks in there that you can study in the video and watch.
Right.
Now when I get to the D, I can finally start checking to see if my perfect 12th is gonna come out. That's that, because this note's tuned. None of these notes have been tuned from here up. So. Okay, now that perfect 12th is really good. There's some movement in that A, so I don't know if it's perfect or if it's slightly narrow. When you play it, it's totally acceptable, and it can be not perfect and be acceptable. It's just some people like that wider perfect 12th stretch. The temperament that I tend to set right here tends to work out as a perfect 12th in most pianos, and it also tends to match the tuner's temperament A to A. I don't know how that works. It just does in my experience. I don't know what's going on, or maybe I can't hear something. I don't know. But anyway, it's pretty clean. But so is the octave is pretty clean. There's actually movement in it, but unless you pay attention, you don't notice it. It's about as much movement in it as a fourth. And if you check your 4/2 octave check, you notice the 4/2 is slightly wide. But listen to the 5th. It's all acceptable. It's all technically in tune. I tend to like my fifths a little bit cleaner. Some of these moved just 2, 3, 4/10 of a cent on me. But notice the fourth is going wah, wah, wah. It's about as slow as I ever hear them. Some of those checks are telling me this D can go that way, but the octave is telling me it can't go any further that way, otherwise the octave is going to sound out of tune. It's already wide 4/2, and it's a 6/3 octave right here. I usually do 6/3 starting about C, but sometimes I'll bring the 6/3s up into here. Anyway, that's just tuning by ear. I'm curious. I usually like aurally. I usually like to tune something that's a little flatter than this average tuning curve. So let's see where I am. But if it's not flat, I'm usually dead on. So tuning aurally down through there, just putting the relationship of all these intervals together. This D is, actually I should take that back. These 2 or 3 notes sometimes are just a little bit sharp, but everything else usually goes a little bit flat. That's usually where the inharmonicity in the piano is. And the tuner is not reading that, it's just telling me where the average curve is for all pianos. But by the time I'm down into here, with exception to 2 or 3 notes right here, I'm usually nailing it or slightly flat because that's where the inharmonicity is when I'm tuning by ear. But if you nailed this, most pianos would sound just fine. I've had some spinets and consoles and that sort of thing where it was not just fine. It was off enough the customer noticed it. And at that time I didn't have the ear to hear it, but now I do. So there I am at D. So I'm gonna keep going. Back to the D for a second. There's your perfect 12 from D3 to A4. The check for that is major 6, major 17th. Okay. A major 6 below the bottom note. So from here down to here. And then major 17th from the top note. Those are, with this little wave in the A, I really can't perceive a difference. And what has happened is I've transitioned in, at some point in here, you'll transition from the 4-2 stretch to the 6-3 stretch all the way down. And this piano, I've transitioned it at the D. Most pianos, I find the transition starts here. Some pianos, I'll find it as far up as the F. I think 1 or 2 I found it way up in here, but a lot of people will transition here. This piano wanted to transition here, or so it seemed. I haven't tuned these to check it either. Maybe the transition should. You won't notice that though. I mean, the performer won't notice that exactly, because you can't actually put the piano in perfect tune. Everything is somewhat tempered. Everything is, except for the unison. Well, in fact, some unisons you actually temper for different reasons, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so I'm going to keep tuning, but there it is, major 6, major 17. So. Thing, you'll hear some people talk about beat speed windows. When I'm tuning a 6-3 octave, I like to use the beat speed window here because it's really helpful. So that major 6, that minor 3rd is the tuning. This is the check note. The minor 3rd above your lower note is the check note for the 6-3 octave. I'm tuning this octave wider than a 4-2, which all these were 4-2s, and I'm getting a little bit wider here. Your minor 3rd inside the octave is your check. Minor 3rd, major 6. You want the major 6 to be identical to the minor 3rd, or a little bit slightly faster than the minor 3rd. The minor 3rd can be slower, but not so slow. This is a C minor chord. Not so slow that the major 3rd above it is faster than the minor 3rd. In other words, fast, this medium can be anywhere in here. It can match that. It can even match that, but it can't go lower than that. It's got to stay within that one. And where am I? That one. It's got to stay within these 2 beat speeds. The piano will tell you where it needs to be. If it needs to be matched with this, or in the middle of the 2, or matched lower with this. There's some pianos where it'll match with that because that perfect 12 works it out there, and the octave still sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
But most pianos, it'll be pretty close to matching with this minor 3rd to major 6. In this case, it matches. check this going up, to check the perfect 12th and stuff. It's the same checks going up, it's just the other direction. So there's your perfect 12th, and here's your 5th, your 4th, and your octave. 4/2 octaves. So I tend to check all that stuff just the same, just the other direction. And I look at my tuner. You could probably just leave it right here on just about any piano, just let it fly right there and tune to that red line, and it'll curve it right on up, and it would be totally fine. I tend to find that some pianos need about a 3/10 or half a cent sharper than this line as a curve. You saw that Steinway D curve that I showed you on here, how steep it gets. Well, I've tuned it here to the red line, and they love it at Lee University. I've also tuned it by ear, stretching to that full curve, and they love it. I don't know that they can tell the difference. So just saying that because these tuners are really good these days. And this isn't one that reads inharmonicity on the fly like the Rayburn Cyber tuner or the Bear tuner. So in light of time, I'm just going to tune to this red line and move on. Because when you're tuning in someone's house, beginning, notice I'm trying to push it down. I'm leaning on the hammer and hitting hard. And I'm wiggling, look. And it's not going anywhere. See that? The tuners tend to move around compared to what you hear as well. But so I can tell it's stable because I can feel it in the pin, I can hear it in the string, I can feel it in the hammer. Notice it's perfectly acceptable. Now, orally, I kind of want to stretch it starting about here, but I'm not gonna. I'm going to use your tuner, your hammer. Sometimes I'll move that string by hitting it with the hammer. Sometimes I'll move the string by turning the tuning hammer. Two inches of hammer tuning hammer length makes a big difference. When you see the note go about 10 cents sharp, it's not because I want the note to go that high. It's because the pin hasn't broken free from the wood to get it higher to settle in better. So sometimes I will. So that was. I'm going to preload this because they're more than 5 cents flat.
So up there they're flat, and down here they're sharp.
Yeah, it had lost the tuning curve a little bit. And what I'm doing here, I'm moving them just to the first little kink, which actually typically adds about 10 cents to the pitch, give or take. But it's adding tension so that when I tune that center string and then come back and tune the unison, I'll be tuning the center string closer to the tension level that it needs to be at ahead of time so it won't drop. And where am I? Doing, I'm not going to tune to the red line. I'm going to slowly go sharper.
Okay.
Because you saw those graphs, so it gets really sharp right there.
Right. This is where it's getting really sharp in the last octave.
Yeah, we've already been going sharp, and now we're going to be like the vertical side of a skateboard ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that tuning by ear, this is flat with this tuner. It's technically correct if you tune it to the red line, but it sounds flat, and everybody acknowledges that. No, in fact, the tuning exam, they even say, we're not looking for you to really stretch that all the way. We want 2 octaves up through here, which would be that red line. Anyway. But when you tune in someone's home or for a concert or something, you do want to stretch this octave. So this preset is not programmed to do that, and I've never bothered to make my own chart. which you could, but see it's below, so. Somewhere around 2 or 3 cents sharp. Something like that. So, see, sounds good, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jumping pin. Scared me. This one, about the same, just a little sharper. Somewhere around there. We're not going to do perfect 12ths anymore, or listen to them anyway. On most pianos, what I'm going to do here works without even listening closely, but so when you get to the D, it's going to be a little sharper than the C sharp, but you're usually going to be right at halfway or just below halfway, somewhere like that. And then the D sharp will be just above halfway. Just above halfway. Like that. And the E. It's almost there. I'm going to do it just below the green line. Sometimes right at it, right there. I need to look at it, so if you want to. The F is going to be right on the green line. I came up with this general curve based on running arpeggios and listening to perfect 12ths, and I just, as a musician, I found it more musical, and it turns out to be where people put it when they're listening carefully. From here on out, you just got to make sure they're not flat. If they're over sharp, people don't seem to usually notice. F sharp and G are going to hover around that green line real close. G sharp, a little bit further out. Now I can go through here orally and make this, tweak this just right, but the A really jumps up there. Because when you run an arpeggio, it's actually a little sharp. Here, the where am I? B, E. that C doesn't sound right until you pull the other unisons in. But that's what I do for that last octave.